What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamoda and Danny Abdeljabbar. What's up, my friend? How are you?
Chilling, man. As per usual. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. All right. So today's going to be kind of a free flow episode. We have a basic topic in mind, and we're going to see where this goes. But I want to start off. So I want to read this article because it's one of the most.
Are we gonna address the elephant in the room here? The fact that we're joined by a special guest.
Oh, sure.
Are you gonna introduce him, or are you just gonna let him?
No, he's not my friend. He's your friend.
For himself. All right. Well, we're joined by Frankie. He's from South Philly, and he is joining us today to give his takes on the topic today. Frankie, why don't you introduce yourself? Because Henry's doing a shit job.
Hey, Danny got it almost right. South Philly, not San Francisco. Those are two very different kinds of crazy. I'm Frankie.
Okay.
I watch sports. I think about sports probably more than is healthy, and I've been told I make people uncomfortable by saying the obvious thing out loud.
Right. Well, hopefully we're not too uncomfortable.
All right.
All right, Henry, what the fuck are we talking about today?
Okay. So
let's just get to it.
So a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about this, and I made a comment that when you watch professional sports, or college sports, or just any spectator sports, the feel you get as a fan of a team are very similar to the tribal feelings that a nationalist would have. Like, it almost mimics nationalism in a way. And being a sports fan, watching a spectator sports and rooting for a team, it kind of invokes this tribal instinct that is almost like a pressure release for people, because everyone in this, if you're, right now the NBA playoffs are going on. It's May 20th. Is it the 20th or 21st?
Today's the 20th. Well, almost the 21st, but notwithstanding.
It's May 20th. It's about 10:30. So right now, OKC and the Thunder are playing. Last night, the Knicks and the Cavaliers played, and the Knicks won in a big comeback victory. And, I'm based in New York, and the Knicks playoff run has been one of the biggest deals in the city in a long time. Sports-wise, I think it's probably the biggest deal since the Giants won the Super Bowl in the 2000s. Just like the city's electric. Like, every single bar that you pass is watching games. There's like Knicks fans ferroting around the street every single night, drunk off their ass. Like, it's really, really electric. Like, it's like really everyone is talking about this. People who are not even basketball fans, like they've completely captured the city. And there's really no other sports team in New York, I think, has the same pull on the tri-state area for reasons, I think, mostly because, well, there's two reasons. First and foremost, New York is a basketball city. Like, we don't have many great football athletes or baseball athletes come out of New York. Like, usually when we have athletes, they're basketball players. And there's like a long history here.
You mean like coming from, as in like born and raised in New York City? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So there's not
basketball's the most accessible. That's the most accessible sport in New York. I mean, we've got plenty of basketball courts, and it doesn't require a whole lot except for a court and a ball. Baseball, that's a whole ass field. Football, that's a whole ass field plus all that gear. Don't even get started on hockey. You got to find an ice rink. So yeah, that makes sense that New York would be mostly a basketball town. But what about the fact that there are like major, like giant other New York sports teams in general? Why do you think that nothing pulls on New York like the Knicks? Is this your bias showing, Henry?
Well, there's only one New York basketball team. So the fan bases with other teams are split. So there's Yankees and there's Met fans, there's Giants and there's Jets fans, and there's Rangers and there's Islanders fans.
What about the Nets? Do they not exist anymore?
They don't really count, man. There's not.
I need to hear Frankie's take on this. Frankie, do the Nets count here?
The Nets absolutely count. They just count differently. The Knicks have over 80 years of generational loyalty at Madison Square Garden, and the Nets are basically trying to build that from scratch in Brooklyn. Brooklyn is the brand. It resonates everywhere as a cultural bellwether in music, art, and fashion, which is a wild thing to say about a team that just tanked its way through half a decade. The Nets don't pull on New York the way the Knicks do because they don't have the history. They've got the vibes, and vibes don't break your heart the same way.
How do you feel about that?
I think the Nets are they're relatively new to the city, and they never really had time to develop a fan base. For most of its history, they're based out of New Jersey. So it's just not, I actually know some people who are Nets fans, but they're either people from Jersey or they're people, who became basketball fans while the Knicks were bad, which was a really long time. And there was like a level of excitement for the Nets a couple of years ago.
Fair.
When they had all these big free agent signings. However, there's nothing that really pulls like New York City, like the Knicks, even compared to like the Yankees and the New York Giants. And it's because, again, it's like they're right in Manhattan. If you go to a Knicks game or if you just watch a Knicks game, they have like Celebrity Row where you see like Ben Stiller and Spike Lee and now like Kylie Jenner and Timothy Chalamet or Chalamet.
Now you're fucking
Chalamet.
Chalamet.
Chalamet. Okay. So
Chalamet.
the guy who is, I guess he looks kind of like a kid, right? But even the guy
like
in Dune, Tracy Morgan and Jimmy Fallon, like they're all there. So there's like this kind of level of prestige surrounding it. But it kind of unites like this upper class of New York with like the lower class of New York. It's like a weird phenomenon. It unites like the Jew, like the Orthodox Jew who's a big fan, and like the Arab guy who lives in Brooklyn. Like Zohran Dami's a big Knicks fan, but at the same time, some hardcore Zionist Jewish guy is also a big Knicks fan. So it brings, and then all your political differences, they just like evaporate when it comes to supporting a sports team. I don't think any other sports team in New York, at the very least, can do the same thing. There's like other sports teams, like the Yankees, for example, with baseball. New York has always been a split baseball town. There's always been multiple baseball teams throughout the city. So back in the day, there were three. There were the Giants, there were the Dodgers, and the Yankees, and the fan bases were split. Like my grandfather is from Manhattan, and he was a big Giants fan when he was younger. People from Brooklyn were obviously Dodgers fans until they were relocated to Los Angeles. And then when the Mets came to town and that franchise started, there was like a split between. There was a very clear line between Mets and Yankees fans. Generally, people who lived in Queens became Mets fans, like Queens and Long Island, they became Mets fans because they were outside of the city. And then people within the city were in Brooklyn or mainly New York, Manhattan, Bronx, they all became Yankees fans. And of course, a lot of fans, they got a lot of fans just because of how successful they were. But there's only one basketball team, and with one of the
all
reasons
the Nets
why
fans, I can just feel all the Nets fans in the comment section. Just,
there's not really a big fan base. Like it's just, I think even a Nets fan would say that. It's, if you go to a Knicks Nets game, it's 90% Knicks fans. It's just, they never, by no fault of their own, they just never really were able to develop a big fan base. And when they were supposed to be really good, that's when the Knicks started like kind of developing and getting these exciting players. But one of the reasons why like this kind of tribal feeling is so strong with the Knicks, because they, you have like this story that's very similar to what a nationalist would say or use as kind of like their story of national origin. So there's like a glory period. So if you look at, I like using the example of Serbia because it's a really good case study. Like Serbia had this period of glory in the 14th century, where there was a Serbian empire, the Kingdom of Serbia, and they controlled most of the Balkans. And then it was conquered by the Turks, and they went through this horrible period of humiliation for 400 years until the 19th century. And then they expelled the Turks, and then they became glorious again, and then they got rid of all their foreign influence, and then they won World War I, and then they defeated the Nazis, and then they ended up getting bombed by Bill Clinton back into humiliation. Like there's like this nationalist timeline, and like a lot of states, like Germany, for example, there's this glory period, and then there's a period of breakup, and there's multiple periods of breakup and humiliation in German history. For example, like the 30-Year War, which was a period of humiliation. And then, of course, World War I was a period of, or Napoleon's, conquering the German states was a period of humiliation. And then the World War I was a period of humiliation. And then that pressure that has built up over multiple generations came up with like a vengeance in the 1930s. So I think you're kind of experiencing that with the Knicks in New York City, because you have this glory period in the 1970s. Then it's the last time they won a championship was the 1970s. And then you have, not some good years, but then you have like another good period of Knicks basketball in the 1990s, but they never won a championship, mainly because because Michael Jordan was in the way. And then they go really after the 90s, they go through this period of really like a 20-year humiliation where they just stunk. They stunk. Like it wasn't just like they stunk and were a bad team. It was like a humiliating team. People would go to MSG to watch rival players. You wouldn't go to see the Knicks teams play. Mm-hmm. You would go to see Kevin Durant play against the Knicks or see LeBron James play against the Knicks. Mm-hmm. And there was a brief period when the Knicks had Carmelo Anthony where they won, I think 54 games. But then they lost in the playoffs. There was this brief period where they were good for a season, for 2 seasons, but then, they went back into the shitter and then they were terrible again. So that history kind of folds up. It is has created this mythology around the team, which is really developed into this intense fandom. So if you look at the, who J.R. Smith is? I know you're not the biggest sports guy, but
I am not. Let's.
So J.R. Smith was a player. So J.R. Smith was a player for the Knicks, in the 2010s. He was coming outside of MSG after a win. He was as a spectator, and he was trampled by the fans. It's on video. He's walking outside. I know, probably thinking that people are gonna be like, "Oh, yo, JR, yeah," and he ends up getting just trampled by the fans.
How does he get How does he just get trampled though?
It was just there was a celebration frenzy. People were looking at JR, and then they just start going crazy.
I need to see this. Hey, Frankie, can you find me the video for this or just some information? Can you drop that in the chat for me?
I dropped a link in the chat, Danny. This happened after the Knicks blew out the Sixers 137-98 in Game 1, and JR was just out there in the crowd as a spectator. And the best part, despite going down under the mob, the man held on to his joint. The Knicks haven't won a championship since 1973, so I get that people are excited, but there's something deeply on brand about New York fans knocking over one of their own beloved former players in a fit of joy.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's see.
There's something uniquely New York about that.
Let's see.
It was just a frenzy of joy would be the way to describe it.
Let's take a look at this video. I actually have it, or Frankie got it for me. I'm going to share it. All right, can you see that? I'm going to bigify this here. Which one's is that JR right there that just fell down?
Yes.
Is that him?
The big black guys at the front of the basketball. Shit. Okay. Hey,
I don't
and
know
it's
why I
fans
thought
of
he
all
died.
races.
You know,
And it's fans of all races. Black people,
yeah, this is very diverse
white fans,
crowd, yeah.
black fans, Spanish fans. It brings everyone together.
Yeah.
There was some other videos of, and honestly, it's kind of disgraceful behavior when people act like this, and this happens in every sports town. There were some Knicks fans that jumped a guy in a Philly jersey, which is fucked up. Like, you obviously don't attack people, especially they had just won the game too. Like, why are you attacking people?
It's funny. I'm reminded of, I don't know any specifics, but I've seen so many videos specifically around like soccer hooligans and also sometimes hockey fans can get really rowdy even if they win and they'll just tear shit up, you know? Frankie, what are some examples of like situations where a sports team won, but their fan base just decided to riot for some strange reason? Can you find any examples of that?
Detroit wins the '84 World Series, and what do Tigers fans do? They looted and burned police cars right outside Tiger Stadium. And look, I dropped a link in the chat if you want to go down the rabbit hole on this. 7 people were actually killed during the chaos after the Pistons won the NBA title in 1990. After a win,
Jesus.
Danny, not a loss. The thing that gets me is that this is basically just what happens when you hand a large group of people a permission slip to feel something enormous, and nobody told them what to do with it once they got it.
Jesus. All right.
I didn't
was
know 7
expecting
people
you-
died. What,
Yeah,
the
neither did I. I mean, I didn't
1984
even know.
World Series?
Yeah, so it's looking at the 84 World Series. They looted and burned police cars outside of the Tiger Stadium. But in 1990, the Pistons won the NBA title.
Oh, okay.
And that's what he was saying. During that game, 7 people died.
Yeah, I mean that's what happens.
Wild. That's wild.
But yeah, I guess we don't. New York fans aren't going to kill you. Hopefully not. But you saw if you like watch this playoff series play out. Like, the Knicks have been playing very well. As of today, they're up 1 game. They had this big comeback victory last night. Who knows what's going to happen? I'm always pessimistically optimistic. I'm usually temper my optimism, because when you're rooting for a sports team, obviously the likelihood is that it's going to be a disappointment. Like, just the odds are going to be is that your team is not going to win the championship. So, but looking at these playoff series, especially against Philadelphia, you see these after, obviously Philadelphia is close to New York. It's about 90 miles. So it's very easy for Knicks fans to go to Philadelphia, the T-Mobile, I think it's a T-Mobile Stadium or T-Mobile
like that,
Arena.
yeah.
And
It's a short
see
train
games.
ride. Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the percentage between Knicks fans and Philadelphia fans were, but it certainly seemed like there was majority Knicks fans in Philadelphia. Or maybe they had more to cheer about, so you just heard them more. But after the game, you just when what was broadcasted, it looked like a stacking of a city. Like, there were just fans, like Knicks fans everywhere, just walking down the street, obviously gloating. And it looked like kind of like a Mongolian sacking of a city, as close as you can get with one sports town like taking over another sports town. It was quite jarring. And Philadelphia is a sports town itself, so it was almost like people were kind of living out that kind of impulse to want to conquer something. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It felt good watching it. You're like, yes, we conquered that city. We conquered that city in a basketball game.
I don't think Frankie would like that very much. I don't think he'd have the same opinion. Frankie, you're from South Philly. What did you feel during this event? Like, how did you feel watching this?
Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend it didn't sting, because it did. Knicks fans in my city acting like they just planted a flag on the moon is genuinely one of the more embarrassing things I've witnessed. But here's what gets me. Henry just called it a conquest and felt good about it, which means the Knicks fans weren't the animals in that story. We were, because we let a basketball game turn our city into something worth conquering.
What do you mean by that? Do you let our city turn into something worth
When your city's
conquering?
identity is so wrapped up in the team that losing a playoff series feels like an occupation, you've already handed over the keys. Philadelphia didn't get conquered by the Knicks. Philadelphia conquered itself by caring that much in the first place.
Kind of an interesting transition.
Okay.
Like, honestly, Henry, this is an interesting topic, but I think, frankly, Frankie, I am not super strong on sports, but I can get the parallels that I feel like you're trying to make here, and I'd like to maybe pivot a little bit to, kind of the broader topic, partly because we're not a sports podcast, and also because I can't really speak to very much of it. I think what you're trying to frame is that sports are kind of like the most socially acceptable form of like tribal nationalism that exists. And, I think you could take that a little bit further and say that authoritarian regimes, they didn't invent that relationship, but they have weaponized that relationship. I think there's plenty of examples that we can point to for that. But before we make that comparison, I think, it's kind of important to think about like what do we mean by like nationalism? How does it work? What are the frameworks? Because I think it's very much a psychological, like, I don't know, a framework that's built on a couple of key things. So you mentioned a bunch of them earlier when you were talking about like Knicks fandom. So in-group identity. So you belong to something larger than yourself. The Knicks fandom is an in-group identity. Then there's the out-group enemy. Someone is threatening what you love, right? This is just name a fucking team that they're playing against at that moment. Maybe it could be Philly for that example when they sacked them. And then they have the shared mythology. You talked about this directly, right? You were talking about a 20-year, lull, and then suddenly they came back, and now everyone has this shared mythology, right? A story about glory, betrayal, destiny, shit like that, You get ritual and spectacles, so you get these repeated ceremonies that reinforce that belonging. The ceremonies here are like the trip to MSG, right? And it's like the riots that happen outside of it almost becomes ritualized. And then you get this idea that like emotional is greater than rational. So you don't think your way into it. You feel your way into like, I feel like a Knicks fan, like I couldn't feel any other way. It's not like a rational thing. It just is. And then there's also parts of it like around the physical body. So the body is a symbol, physical strength, national virtue. Physical strength also directly ties to sports players, right? They have to be physically strong to do the job, But I mean, does that sound like what you were describing in terms of like Knicks fandom or just general sports team fandom in general?
So I'm just saying, I'm just using the Knicks as an example because like that's what I'm observing. Like that's what we're experiencing it. But through this experience, I'm also, have more context of like what inside of me is being pulled so hardly, like what inside of other people is being pulled to, when you think about it, something that is irrational. Like it doesn't really make sense, or maybe it makes
It's
perfect
emotional.
sense. But like when you think about it, like logically, you're talking about
like spell it out, put it on paper.
Guys who make millions of dollars, and then you're sitting around, you're watching them play sports, and if they lose that game, which you're not part of, like you're not contributing to the team winning or anything like that. You're not playing the sport with them or anything like that. So you're not actually contributing to that team, besides, in a monetary fashion, like if you buy their tickets or their hats or jerseys or whatever. So, but you're still, and those guys, it's not like a local, when you think about it, it is framed in kind of this local identity because, they're bringing glory to your city. So you can get wrapped up in that kind of like local nationalism or local tribalism, but the guys in the team aren't from your city. They're free agents. They're from all over the world. They're from, they can be, a lot of guys in the Knicks are actually from Philadelphia or from that area, which is ironic. So, it's just you start to reckon, like you can peel this back to like a pep rally. If you went to a high school that had like a football program, you may have had a pep rally before a game. And what that is doing is that's mimicking, like essentially a nationalist rally, like a hardcore rally, but it's doing it in a very low stakes environment. So that's what I'm getting at, is that
that's the ritual and the spectacle around it, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
These instincts exist in everyone. And spectator sports is like a low stakes way of expressing them. And sports is, again, in my opinion, especially team sports, is is a competition, but it's also a simulation of war.
Yeah.
I mean, there's tactics
when you talk
involved.
About, well, we can get into like the tactics of or like the proxy of sports to warfare, but I think what you said about the pep rallies really sticks out to me. Not from a sports perspective. I didn't go to a high school that had pep rallies, and if they did, I wasn't aware of them, so they weren't very good. But what I can relate it back to is just kind of like the ritual and the spectacle that I was talking about in terms of like nationalism and how to motivate and move masses. I think about like Leni Riefenstahl, who was like a famous director in Nazi Germany and did all of the Nazi propaganda. She filmed Nuremberg rallies, the same way that we would film, a pep rally or like, the Super Bowl halftime show. You get the whole crowd is like in matching colors. There's synchronized chanting. There's this like very carefully engineered like emotional climax that usually comes to fruition for a lot of these things. And the stadium itself is kind of a statement in and of itself, right? It's the ritual space, right? A stadium today is built at the same architecture as the Roman Colosseum, for the same purpose. Unite the whole crowd around this like shared emotional experience. There's this historian, George Moss. He literally called Nazi rallies the nationalization of the masses. And I think, the analog that you're making here, sports, I think it does the same thing in a peacetime.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're creating this community based off a sports team, and you don't even necessarily need to be a fan of that team. You can be a Lakers fan from anywhere. You could be a Yankees fan and live anywhere. I mean, if you're a successful franchise, you're going to attract fans globally, and you may just have like a family member who's from a particular city, and you might become a fan of that team because your mom is from Seattle, so you become a Seahawks fan or something like that.
Right. Or you went to school in that city for like a couple years and now, stuck with you.
So it's, it's just an interesting thing to observe. And what I wanted to go over today, something else, is that when you dive into it and when you look at it within this context, I think people start to tie sports to actual nationalist projects. So I want to talk about this article that I read, and it is one of the most bizarre things I've ever read in my entire life. It is very weird. I'm going to pull it up. I'm just going to find my screen. What did I do with it? Here we go. All right. So I'm going to share my computer screen because I want to prove that this article exists, that this isn't like a parody that I made up. So here's the article. It's from the Oklahoman. It has since been deleted after it is published. So I think it was on the Oklahoman, a prestigious newspaper based out of Oklahoma. And the title of this article is, "Like Thunder, Israel is an underdog that has become hated."
I mean,
I'm going to repeat that.
Hot take,
repeat
right?
That again. Like the Thunder, Israel is an underdog that has become hated.
Is this okay? Are we allowed to do this? Like, at what point did someone decide that the playoffs were an appropriate venue for this comparison? There's a line, right? There has to be a line. People don't like our team is on one side of it. The Jewish people is on the other side. Those don't go in the same column, Aiton. Henry's going to explain why this is actually a perfect case study, and I already hate that he's right. But somebody had to edit this. Someone read it and went, Yeah, Thunder Israel, that's a sports take. Ship it. That person should also call someone they trust.
I'm going to read this article. And it is quite shocking that someone reviewed this and decided to publish this. I don't know like how big of a publication the Oklahoman is, if it's like the New York Post of Oklahoma City, but I'm going to start reading. It's NBA playoff season, and once again, as fans are glued to their televisions, there's something strangely familiar abrew between online keyboard warriors and the voices of punditry as they respond to the continued dominance of the Oklahoma City Thunder, a young, disciplined, strategically crafted organization, impeccably drafted and relentlessly adherent to a culture of selflessness and community, suddenly finds itself resented. The greater the Thunder's success becomes, the more critics seem determined to diminish it or even root for its demise. So, Danny, I know you're not the biggest sports guy, but the OKC Thunder, they have been the best team in basketball for the past 2 years. And they've been the best team probably since the Golden State teams. They're unliked, I think, by the general basketball consensus. And there's a lot of jealousy involved in that because they're such a dominant team, but there's other things that people don't like about them. They'll say they're dirty. They'll say that they do a lot of like foul baiting. So they'll swap around to get calls and exaggerate things. And, there's some guys on the team that have like punchable faces. So
Frankie, why do people hate OKC Thunder so much? I need to know from like a sports analyst perspective.
Danny hating OKC makes complete sense, and I'll tell you exactly why. They just finished 64-18, grabbed the number 1 seed for the second straight year, and Gilgeous-Alexander won his second consecutive MVP. When a team is that good, for that long, rooting against them isn't irrational. It's basically the only sane response. The punchable face thing is really just people's brains inventing a reason to hate something they can't beat.
You invent a reason that you can't beat?
I don't know. If you look at some of the players like Alex Caruso and Jalen Williams are just kind of like, oh God. They just have these huge faces that are just like, they're just annoying to watch. And they're so good. Like the team is just so dominant. I'm not sure what the score is right now. Last I checked, they were winning. But it's like, you have a feeling of hopelessness when your team plays them. So there's animosity and jealousy there. That is true towards the team. But generally, I think they're probably they're probably looked less favorably. And honestly, the team is not like the guys on the team aren't bad guys or anything like that. It's not like a team of thugs or like pieces of shit. They're normal, hardworking guys, but it's just the dominance that they have they become a villain. So just to give you some context. So I'm going to continue with the article. As both a fiercely proud Oklahoman and a Jew, the parallels between the Thunder and the nation of Israel are difficult to ignore. Neither was supposed to become what it is. Oklahoma City remains one of the NBA's smallest markets. We lack the glamour of LA, the nightlife and beaches of Miami, Florida, or the finance and media power of New York City. Yet we built something remarkable anyway. Rather than buying relevance, we created it. Rather than following others, we reimagined our own path to success by relying on the resources and skills we had with discipline and our own brand of resilience. So, I mean, the team itself was built with like very smart moves by their general manager, just to give you some context. And they drafted very well. So it wasn't like the Yankees who just like purchased all these players. Mm-hmm. Israel's story shares many of those attributes. A young, microscopic nation, limited in natural resources, surrounded by hostility, perpetually under scrutiny, and constantly forced to justify its actions and existence. Israel, nonetheless, transformed itself into a global powerhouse of innovation, technology, defense, medicine, and agriculture. Like the Thunder and even Oklahoma City, it has risen out of the ashes of a traumatic past despite all odds. So are you starting to see like the parallels?
I see where he's going. I don't necessarily know if I agree, but continue.
And yet reaching a mountaintop has a strange way of generating dislike. When dynasties emerge in sports, franchises often cry foul, questioning the legitimacy of success. The more competent and victorious the organization becomes, the more emotionally invested outsiders hope for its failure. We are witnessing that now with the Thunder. They are young, composed, and incredibly well managed. Instead of praising the blueprint, many fans react with disdain, espousing conspiracy theories amplified by social media. Israel experiences a similar phenomenon on a far more consequential stage. Of course, criticism of governments and their policies is fair game, but the hyper-fixation on Israel often transcends normal criticism into deeper and darker discomfort with Jewish strength, sovereignty, and achievements. When Israel thrives across the spectrum of global stages, many observers convert healthy criticism into rapid animosity. The reaction says less about Israel or the Thunder than it does about our own human nature. We are comfortable with underdogs. What unsettles us is when the underdogs stop behaving like victims and constantly triumph. The world loves stories of perseverance until it produces an uncompromising might. Then admiration mutates into skepticism and distrust. The Thunder are not hated because they somehow gamed the system. They are hated because they mastered it. Israel is not obsessively scrutinized because it failed, but due to its success, despite deeply rooted envy and darker historical motives. Both represent communities that learned how to preserve through adversity by becoming sharper, more resourceful, and unified. Both inspire fierce loyalty among those who identify with them. And both remind us that prosperity, especially when unexpected, rarely comes without a side of envy. The takeaway: success does not solely reveal excellence. It often reveals buzzards circling overhead, waiting for the demise of whom they underestimated.
I think the reason why I feel so uncomfortable with this article is because the idea that like we have this, go from an underdog, they get clever and then suddenly they dominate, right? Yeah, you could make the comparison to Israel. He did. Can't you make this for a lot more problematic like nations as well? Like they're not the only underdog that came out on top. We can do this for a lot of different, historical things. I don't know. I don't know why this comparison makes me feel so uncomfortable. And very clearly, the Oklahoman felt uncomfortable with it too, because this was a guest opinion. And even though they flagged it as such and wrote at the very top in yellow that this piece expresses the views of its authors separate from those of this publication, they still felt the need to pull it. And the only way you can find it now is in the archive of the internets. So like, what do you think? What do you think's going on there?
Listen, like you could make this comparison to this state to any good team, but it is, it's like just very interesting. Like the psychological aspect of it is like what's most interesting to me. So this guy's obviously like a Jewish Zionist who loves Israel and is very defensive over Israel. And this guy's obviously, a big basketball fan, and he loves the Thunder. So, psychologically, he like kind of merged both of them into one story. So the nation state and the basketball team are comrades in like this same struggle against like this pathology of jealousy
Haters
that wants to bring them down for being great. Like that is the most interesting part of it, that this person really just kind of wraps him up into this common struggle. It's fascinating. And I don't even want to like shit on Israel right now. Like I want to just like understand like the mindset of thinking like this, because I think we could fall victim to this as well. Like I don't think like these hardcore Zionist types, like there's something different about them.
No, no, not at all.
I think it's just
Not at
something
all,
that's
actually.
like been conditioned in their head for like such a long time. And it's just, they're playing out these things in a way that's like very weird to most people like this. Like they obviously had to pull this because people are like, what the fuck is this? Like people read this and were like, what?
Yeah.
And if it went, if they didn't pull it, it would have probably went very viral in a negative way.
Probably.
So it's just like it's just fascinating where the human mind goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a strong link between, some dictatorial, or, traditionally bad guy politicians or regimes and sports. They weaponize sports quite literally. I mean, I'm thinking of like the 1936 Berlin Olympics, which is the obvious one, right? Hitler didn't create that sports nationalism link, but he definitely optimized it. And the Olympic Committee knew what was happening at the time, and they just let it happen because the games were already like this nationalist project in the first place. And then you get like Jesse Owens coming and winning, in his event, and that was a PR nightmare for Hitler. But even still, like the U.S. didn't let Hitler shake his hand. FDR never invited Owens to the White House, and kind of there's this idea of like the triumph
Didn't
over
Jesse
fascism.
Owens say that Hitler was nicer to him than the Americans?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think I remember that.
But
that's just like one
nicer than me than the Americans.
Yeah, and that was just one example. Like there's also Mussolini's Italy, right? So Italy won the 1934 and 1938 World Cups under Mussolini, and I think Mussolini kind of very strongly understood football as the state instrument before almost anyone else did. Referees were pressured, opposition was managed. This is it was definitely rigged emotionally, in terms of like in service to the game, and the crowd got the catharsis of winning. The regime ended up getting legitimacy. There's another one, the World Cup in 1978 in Argentina. At the time, there was a military junta that was running Argentina, and they hosted the World Cup. And at the same time, they were running death camps, and Argentina wins, and the regime gets this massive legitimacy boost, both internationally and domestically. And people who were about to, be disappeared were in the same city as like, the celebrating crowds, which I think is a pretty good example of like sports as a fascist alibi that maybe not a lot of people have heard of. More recently, I'm using a lot of World Cup analogs because I feel like this is closest to nationalism because they're all, sponsored teams that are going against other states. But then there's like that whole backlash around Qatar hosting the last World Cup and how they were using like slave labor from, India and Bangladesh and shit. But nevertheless, they're like legitimizing their whole, this whole nationalist project by building these giant mega structures and these gorgeous brand new cities in months just to like showcase, like, look at us, we're Qatar, like look at our sports. And people ate that shit up, totally ignoring kind of like the darker historical motives, to use a turn of phrase from our friend who wrote that article there. And there's kind of a very strong connection between sports and nationalism, or sports and fascism easily. And that connection can be like, it's used as a tool because of exactly what you were saying before. Because these people aren't any different. Like you're just what grips you and what turns you into a strong, solid Knicks fan is the same mechanism that can turn any human being into supporter of a despotic regime.
Well, there's a really good book called How Soccer Explains the World. That it's basically, it dives into like these big football rivalries and how they tell the story between, different societies and different social conflicts. So it goes over like the, man, I don't know my soccer that well, but I think the team in the Rangers, which I believe are a Northern Irish club, I might be
Why
mistaken,
don't we
but it
ask-
goes over,
why don't we
like,
ask
it
Frankie?
explains,
Let's
this
ask
is what he's
Frankie.
here for, right?
Yeah, right. What was the question specifically that you didn't know?
How soccer explains the world. What are the case studies used?
Henry, Rangers is Glasgow, Scottish, not Northern Irish. And the book
Okay.
is Franklin Foer's How Soccer Explains the World. I dropped a link in the chat. The whole Celtic Rangers thing is Catholic versus Protestant, rooted in the Protestant Reformation, playing out on a soccer pitch. And Danny already nailed the whole thesis in one sentence. The passions that make a fan weep for their team are the same passions that can be channeled to build a community, fuel a revolution, or start a war.
What are some of the other case studies? Wait, do I have to say his name for him to answer it? Hey, Frankie, what are some of the other case studies used in how soccer explains?
You got Serbia, Red Star Belgrade, whose fan groups like the Ultra Bad Boys were organized by the club itself and helped fuel Serbian nationalism into actual wartime violence. You got Barcelona versus Real Madrid, where the animosity lets Catalans believe they're engaged in a centuries-old struggle against centralism and imperialism. And then the one nobody expects. The last chapter is literally called How Soccer Explains the American Culture Wars, arguing there's a cleavage between parts of the country that adopted soccer and the parts that didn't. So Henry, the whole book is basically your thesis. Does globalization flatten tribalism, or does it just give tribalism a bigger stadium?
So this is where, all right, so I'm going to admit, Danny, I thought this idea was stupid, having the AI thing for a while, but now I find it very helpful.
How so?
Because
Tell
now
me.
he's being helpful. Frankie, can you tell me more about why the U.S. case study, like the division between people who adopted soccer and not, and what was the conclusion? I read this book a long time ago and I forget most of it.
Henry, the conclusion is basically the opposite of what you'd expect. Instead of destroying local cultures, globalization actually revived tribalism. And the American chapter is the proof of concept right here at home. Soccer in the U.S. got associated with bourgeois yuppie status, but conservatives saw it as essentially un-American, so the divide wasn't even really about the sport. The people who were anti-soccer were more in fear of globalization than the game itself. Your sport preference became a political identity before you even laced up your cleats. And that, Danny, is exactly what you're doing every single Sunday, whether you know it or not.
Every single Sunday.
That's interesting. So that's
Who said I was religious?
No, he's talking about football. So you really are clueless, man.
Sports.
Nerd. No, that's actually really interesting. So I read this book like 10 years ago and I remember like just bits and pieces of it. But the fact that, and I actually agree with that, like that's like a really kind of profound observation, that soccer in the US never really did catch on. There obviously, good soccer players who came out. Like I went to high school with a kid who went to who played in the English Premier League. But there definitely was this. If I look back at like the kids I know who play soccer and the people who I know who are into soccer, they're definitely come from like a more upper class background. Like they come, and they're generally
The
more,
kids eating
they
the
come
orange
from more like
slices.
a liberal, more upper class area. It's not, they're from like metropolitan areas. And it's really true that a lot of conservatives reflexively will be like, "Oh, fuck soccer! Get that soccer ball out of here. We only play football, but we only played the good old sport: football, basketball, baseball."
It's for the parents that didn't want to subject their kids to CTE, right? They didn't want them to have full contact sport.
At the same time, soccer is like the entry level sports for like everyone. Like a lot of kids start off like their first sport that they play, the first team sport they play is soccer. And it's probably just because of like development, because most kids at a young age, they can run and they can kick things and they have like more control over their feet. But children, like toddlers, they can't catch anything. Like they have zero hand-eye coordination. Like my kid, my 2-year-old has zero hand. You can't catch anything. He can kick something. He's actually pretty strong too. Like he can push something. He can even throw something, but he can't track something with his hand and catch it yet, or like not like a small ball. He can whack a baseball, he can whack a ball off a tee, but he can't just like monitor something. And so that's why it's an entry level sport. But going back to just the soccer thing, it's interesting because in the United States, we actually don't have as much pride in our national teams than Europeans do. And I think we probably, in America, we have the most pride in our hockey team, to be honest, which is like the fourth most popular sport in the US. Like we don't give no one cares about the US basketball team because it's just so dominant that it's like, you're like, okay, like, of course the team with Steph Curry and LeBron James and Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum are going to blow everyone out. Like there's nothing that could come close to them. So it's like kind of boring to watch. And like sometimes they're like, I kind of want Serbia to win. I kind of want to see France put up a game because it would just make things interesting. And but with hockey, like there's obviously Canada, it's a juggernaut. So you take great pride as an American when the US hockey team beats Canada. But other than that, it's like fun to see America dominate the Olympics and get the most gold medals. But there's really nothing like the World Cup. Yeah. Like Americans aren't going to get into like a hooligan fight like how Europeans do over the World Cup.
Maybe they might. I mean, it's 2026. We're hosting it this year. You know, maybe they might.
I mean, if the United States put up a good soccer team, which it really just, I'm not a soccer expert or follow it really too closely, but from my understanding, it's just, we don't have this thing, like we have the athletes to compete, obviously, but we don't have like the same development systems in soccer that they do in Europe and Latin America. Like they basically take kids who are talented when they're like 5 and they put them with like the best coaches and the best training and they like train them at a young age. We have something similar with like AAU basketball, but probably not even to the same degree how they have that in soccer, where they put like their best coaches with their teenage groups to like really develop them. Like a lot of AAU basketball coaches are they're not very good. You know, it's like you get the better coaches as you go up into, higher level high school and really college. So
but you're saying like other countries will invest in the children with the best coaches, like from a young age, and then they keep
that's what I was listening to something with Landon Donovan, who was one of the best U.S. soccer players, and he was talking about how what the differences are between like the European system and the American system when it comes to player development. And Europeans, they spend a lot more time on development, and put a lot more resources in like their kind of like their young boys clubs. So their clubs from like 12 to 16, they put like a lot of resources in there. And in the US, in our sports, we don't like, people take an interest of you in athletics if you just have like the physical tools, then coaches will like invest in you. But also like there's all sorts of problems with like AAU basketball. Like it's kind of become a weird cash grab in some degree, where it's like so expensive for parents to keep up with all the games that they have, and all the traveling that they have to do to play in different tournaments, and they have to make extreme sacrifices so their kids can travel from city to city to play. And they're doing it because they think that, they want their kid to get into college and, get opportunities that come with becoming a college basketball player, but that doesn't always work out. There's a lot of risk involved for these families that kind of go on this journey with their kids. So you're seeing a lot more players in the NBA kind of have this nepotistic background per se. That's not totally true, but a lot of kids are coming from, higher, kind of more upper class backgrounds than guys like Ron Artest, who was like grabbed out of the projects. And
well, so let me play with this idea, because I think I'm formulating something in my head. Tell me if this sounds fucking stupid or if I'm onto something here. If we're doing the analog to like fascism or nationalism broadly, but having your kid play a sport, would you say is like an honor? Would you say that, especially as a sports fan?
As an honor?
Yeah, like if your son went on to be a famous sports player, athlete, pick a sport, doesn't matter. Would that bring you honor, especially as a sports fan?
Yeah, I think anyone would be extremely proud of their child if they had a successful career in athletics.
Certainly. And if you thought that your son had some promise in this, especially because, you're a sports fan and you played sports yourself, you would go to probably some reasonably great lengths to support your child in trying to become the best sports player in whatever sport.
But I have the
they excel at,
resources
right?
to do that. You know what I mean?
You do.
Like,
That's not what I'm getting at here. So we're agreeing on those fronts. Is there something to be said here? Is there an analog here to like sending your kid to war, or like your son being, fighting for the fatherland? And like, yeah, maybe that's not a very strong a comparison in everyday or broad-based like American society, but like think back in the times when nationalism was a fever, and it was kind of an honor for your kid to be, in the military and fight for its country and defend the fatherland, so on and so forth. And those folks who were of privilege were the ones that got to go to the military academies, were the ones that eventually became officers, high-ranking officials, not like the B squad, right? Is there something to be said there? Hey, Frankie, help me boil this down, because I feel like I'm onto something, but I'm like word vomiting a little. We're doing this live here. I don't have any notes on this.
Yeah, Danny, you're onto something real. The rich kid doesn't go to the trenches, he goes to West Point, and the rich kid's son doesn't go to the rec league. He goes to the IMG Academy in Florida, where they're basically manufacturing the officer class of professional sports. Same pyramid, different uniform. And here's the thing, nobody wants to say. Both systems sell the dream of meritocracy, while the entry fee quietly weeds out who gets to compete for it in the first place. The flag and the jersey both say, anyone can earn this, and they're both lying to you with a straight face.
How does this compare, Frankie, though, to like the idea of nationalism, and bringing honor to your country or bringing honor to your family, by participating either in sports as the one side of the analog, or, warfare, military on the other side of that coin?
The honor thing is the whole trick, Danny. Whether you're storming a beach or scoring a hat trick, the story you're told is that you're doing it for something bigger than yourself, but the something bigger always has a logo on it. A country needs you to believe dying for a border is noble, and a city needs you to believe crying over a playoff loss is justified. Both are asking you to outsource your emotions to an institution that will absolutely never cry back. And the family honor angle you're pulling on is where it gets really dark, because that's the mechanism. You're not just representing yourself, you're carrying the weight of people who came before you, which means the shame of failure isn't yours alone either. That's not inspiration, man. That's a leash with a flag on it.
It's dark. How do you feel about that, Henry?
So all right. I think the comparison is you're not like serving your country if you become an athlete, unless you're, in the Olympic Games. But I don't think most Americans like see it as that. Like, oh, he's a great rower and he's serving our country on the national stage. Like, I think people are just like kind of in awe of like the athleticism and dedication it takes to get to that level. I think that's where really the pride comes.
What about North Korean athletes?
I think we have a different perspective in the U.S. Like
Sure.
I said earlier, we don't put as much stock into our national teams or as much dedication into our national teams than other countries do. Like, I think that like in the World Baseball Classic or the FIBA, whatever the National Baseball League is called. The U.S. didn't win. They lost to Venezuela. I think they lost to Venezuela.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, which is
And-
ironic given the fact that we stole their sitting president right out of his bed.
No one really. I don't think most people cared. Like, I didn't really care that much. I'm sure Venezuelans were super pumped. That was probably fucking awesome for them.
Yeah.
I'm sure
the irony was palpable,
I'm sure it's a bigger deal in Japan when Japan is successful with national baseball than it is to Americans when the U.S. is successful in national baseball, or international baseball rather. So, what I'm saying is that, like, the U.S. is like such a different state than every other country because it's so big and it's just so diverse. And we tend to, our loyalty kind of goes towards the, our local metropolitan area. So people put all their energy into the 49ers or something, or the, whatever their local, their favorite sports team is. In Europe, obviously the same dynamic exists where there's like, extreme fucking, and you lived in Germany. I'm sure the Bayern Munich fans were nuts there. Or the soccer hooligans there were crazy. Like, but that
more
also
broadly,
applies,
the German national team was,
yeah,
because I was there twice during 2 different World Cups, and it was fascinating to see German nationalism resurge in a controlled and healthy manner, but definitely like flag waving and, chanting and singing national anthems and just generally being like super uber, like German proud was a weird construct, because outside of national soccer team, there's not like a ton of that happens in Germany for obvious dark historical reasons. That was fascinating to me, but I wonder, Henry, here's a good question. If, we're a big country, we're very diverse in both thought and vibe and, all other metrics. If the World Series, as an example, baseball, was truly a World Series, and like you could get teams like, the Red Sox playing the Japanese national team, do you think Americans would be more apt to, stand behind, their, would that be a stronger comparison? This is the American Boston team, versus Japan.
I mean, no, because in Major League Baseball, it's the best players in the world. They're international players in the league. So you have like the best player in the world is Japanese. But he plays for an American
It would make
team.
for a really good game, right?
But if you're saying like, if the winner of like the World Series, or you're going to say, okay, like there's no longer, it's just like the MLB championship game. And then the winner of the MLB championship game goes into a tournament with the Nippon, the Japanese baseball
or just
league,
like some
and the
truly
Taiwan baseball
world
league,
series,
like the Tokyo, the whatever the big baseball, what's the Tokyo Giants or the something Giants.
Right, Frankie, what's
they
what's
played
the
a
name
winner
of that?
then that would be, I don't know. I think it would still, people would still remain.
But we have that like capacity though, right? Like, I mean, people
I would
from New York
be rooting for, well, let me pull this back. Let's just say if the Red Sox won the MLB championship and they played the
winner of whatever
Japanese
world. We could just ask Frankie. Frankie, what's the name of the what's the
the Yomiuri Giants. The Yomiuri Giants. They played the Yomiuri Giants in the World Series. I would be rooting for the Yomiuri Giants over the Red Sox. Yes. Strongly. I would be rooting hard for the Yomiuri Giants over the Red Sox. And
so why is that not the case
for any Red Sox fan would be rooting hard for the Yomiuri Giants over the Yankees.
Yeah.
Like we would want the Red Sox to collapse and have a horrible game against whatever, the traveling circus league, like we would want them to be embarrassed at a national level.
Because your
That's how-
tribalism isn't national in this sports case, right? Your tribalism is
Yes.
metro area.
Yes, it's your local town. But what I'm trying to say is that in Europe, there's a lot more energy that's put into their national teams. And I think, you could kind of pull this, and this is like a can of worms that maybe we're not ready to open up. But, I feel, fascism was like a very uniquely European political movement. And it existed in a very unique time. But in my people, liberal types are going to be like, oh, it's fascist in America, or they'll call like Israel fascist, which, I think it's like, it has commonality with fascism, but like, to me, fascism is like something that's very uniquely, just European in that place and time. And I don't even really consider, I use Paul Godfrey's definition of fascism, where it actually even excludes Nazi Germany from that. But the same conditions that, were in Europe that contributed to like fascism, are those the same conditions that kind of exist in that zeitgeist that contribute to people being just really, really attached and putting so much emotional energy into their national football clubs? That's the question.
I mean, I'd say yes. And what throws me for a loop is the United States, right? Because we clearly exhibit the same ability and quality and propensity to gravitate towards these sports teams, like someone might gravitate to, some nationalist identity. But when it comes to sports teams specifically, we're not nationalist. We're extremely hyper tribalist in the sense of like, we're only going to be around this one metro area. So that's the one thing that throws in for a bit of a wrench for me. So there has to be like something different about those two mechanisms, the things that draw people to sports and the things that draw people to nationalism, such to explain why that doesn't apply to the United States, unless the United States is just the exception rather than the rule. But if we don't think about the United States for a moment, it seems to me like fairly self-evident that the same like psychological or cognitive, mechanisms that make you want to root for your national team are indeed the same mechanisms that make people very nationalistic or fascistic in extreme cases, And I see direct parallels and direct uses of sports and nationalist or fascistic, regimes where they were like uniquely and tightly bound with one another. So I don't know. I'm a little bit stuck. I'm saying yes and no at the same time. What do you think?
I think just to simplify it, I think like the competition and the rituals around sports, they touch the same part of the human spirit that will make you rally around the flag and be like, just like super excited for Trump, you know what I mean? Or super excited for Hitler in a more extreme example.
Yeah.
They touch, or super excited for Biden. We'll use all the examples.
Nobody was super excited for Biden. Let's be real.
Super excited for
Obama would have been a better
Obama.
choice.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah.
And like even politics though, it's like, there was a weird election. We haven't even talked about it, where Thomas Massey was unseated in a primary.
Really?
Yeah. It was a lot of money that was put into remove
I think
him.
there's some broader context for that warrants a deeper look, but that's interesting.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that, but I mean, that was a Republican primary. But like a lot of politics on like the national level, it's like purely like it's almost like team sports. It's, you have like it doesn't really matter what your party does, like whatever they do.
No matter who,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are the same instinct. Those are the same parts of the spirit that are touched by spectator sports. But
Yeah, what do
Yeah,
you think,
I mean,
Frankie? What's your take on this whole, connection between sports and nationalism?
Yeah, Henry's not wrong, and that's what bothers me about it. Blue no matter who and my team no matter what are the exact same sentence. You just swapped the jersey color. The logic is identical. Pre-committed loyalty that survives any amount of evidence to the contrary. The scary part isn't that sports fans do it. It's that we built entire democracies assuming people wouldn't.
right. All right. Cool. Well, let's wrap this thing up because we're longer than I thought we would be on this.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Bro History. You can rate and review the podcast. You can join us on YouTube. And Danny, anything else to add?
We're doing a little bit of experiments with this AI stuff, so let us know what you think in the comments. Obviously, still working out some hiccups, but the software is really awesome. If you're interested in this and you want something like it, let me know in the comments section, and maybe I'll share it with others. But for now, it's mine. So, yeah, let us know.
We're basically trying to create an AI version of Jamie from Joe Rogan. That's what this is.
Yeah. Got to get the settings dialed in right, though.
Okay. People are gonna let's do fun AI. That's the way the world's going. Okay, guys, peace.
Peace.